Good day, everyone. I am Ethan Toavs, a 21-year-old classical composer. This is an overview of how I turned the 2003 to 2009 My Little Pony theme song into a neoclassical sonata. I do not know how many of you following me have any musical training. As such, I will try to explain this in a way that most people can understand, without relying too heavily on any advanced theoretical jargon. It is recommended that before moving on, you listen to both the sonata and the theme song it is derived from. Links to both are in the description. I would like to start this by explaining just how I came up with this idea. So I was in bed one night, trying to fall asleep, and then late night thoughts happened. I got the seemingly laughable idea to turn the My Little Pony theme song into a classical sonata. Normally I don't act on such impromptu thoughts, but this was an exception. I thus begrudgingly got out of bed and composed a very quick sketch in 5 minutes. As you can hear, it was dog shit, but it served as the basis of what was to come. The next morning, I had to actually come up with a plan of what was to happen here. Otherwise, the sketch that I composed the night prior would be meaningless. Setting aside the time to do this was the first order of business. At this point, I was taking 8 simultaneous classes at my university, so I can only set aside an hour or two every day for this. As such, I completed it in roughly a week, with around 15 hours being spent on it in total. Knowing then how I would budget my time, I needed to do the actual theoretical heavy lifting, and thus I went to work trying to mold the My Little Pony theme song into that of a classical sonata. In order to understand how this happened, I first need to explain what a sonata actually is. Simply put, it is one of the quintessential forms or song structures of the classical era of Western music. It has a general structure of A-A-B-A. The first 2 A sections are called the exposition. The exposition is divided into 2 theme groups, a theme group 1 and a theme group 2, respectively. The theme group 1 is in the tonic key, and the theme group 2 is in the dominant key. The tonic key ultimately functions as home here. It is where you start, and in this version of the form, it is also where you end. The dominant key is built off of the 5th degree of the tonic key and serves as someplace new. It is the ultimate creator of tension in the overall structure. The B section, called the development, focuses on developing or making changes and variations to the themes and ideas introduced in the exposition. The final A section, called the recapitulation, has both theme group 1 and theme group 2 in the tonic key, meaning that everything is home and all tension is resolved. The structure of the My Little Pony theme song, on the other hand, is not nearly as complicated as that of the sonata form. The piece also has a simple structure of A-A-B-A. Unlike the sonata form, though, the A section here is simply split into 2 similar melodies. The B section is one that contrasts with the A section and also has 2 main melodies of its own. The A section then repeats again in almost exactly the same way that it appeared at the beginning. Additionally, there was a short riff in the introduction of the song that appears in between each section. Knowing this, I had to mold the melodies from the My Little Pony theme song into the structure of a classical sonata. First, I needed to find melodies from the theme song to constitute the basis of each theme group in my sonata. This proved easy enough since the My Little Pony theme already has 2 contrasting sections, the A and B sections respectively, to draw from. As such, the melodies of the A section of the theme song would be the basis for theme group 1, and the melodies of the B section of the theme song would be the basis for theme group 2. In order to keep track of all of the melodies and themes from the My Little Pony theme song, as well as material derived from them, I will classify them by the contents of their lyrics. This is the introduction riff. This
My little pony, gee, I'm so glad you're my friend.
is the I'm so glad you're my friend theme. This
Rainbow Dash always dresses in style. Sweetie Belle's magic brings a great big smile. I hope we hear a story.
is the Rainbow Dash always dresses in style theme. And this
We're pony pals, never far apart. They will always have a place in my heart.
is the You Will Always Have a Place in My Heart theme. Now that we've effectively categorized our material, we can begin the analysis. We start off with a basic introduction. This sets the tone and the mood of the overall piece. It is based primarily off the introduction riff from the theme song. Here, I turn that riff into what is called a sequence, where I repeat it but lowering or raising the pitch of it as I go. I also use the pattern of the riff in the left hand. This is done over a constant note or a pedal point in the left hand. During the second iteration of the sequence, I change it up and prepare to head to the end, or the cadence, of the introduction. I then introduce a basic left-hand accompaniment as I head to the first theme group. And now, we begin the first theme group. It opens with the iconic melody that we all associate with My Little Pony. As stated earlier, we will call this the I'm So Glad You're My Friend theme. For the first statement of the theme, I present it as it is stated in the original theme song. For the second phrase, I change it so that it sits over a dominant chord. This both prolongs the theme and brings it more in line with classical convention. For the third phrase, we hear it exactly as it is in the first phrase. For the fourth phrase, I change it so that it effectively concludes this 4-phrase long theme, and I make it shorter so that it keeps its momentum and propels the piece forward. The next 2 phrases are a transition to the second theme group. At the end of the first phrase of the transition, I briefly have a small snippet of the introduction riff that we heard earlier. The second phrase starts the same as the first, but changes halfway through to prepare for the cadence. Here we arrive at the second theme group. As you can see, it starts with the Rainbow Dash Always Dresses in Style theme. The harmonies are altered so that it more closely follows the classical conventions. The changes to the harmony also make the overall phrase feel longer. This section of the theme song had cadences much more frequently, resulting in it sounding like several phrases instead of one long one. This is not bad, but the changes I made better suit the classical tradition. The final difference is that I made the phrase end in the relative minor instead of the major like it does in the original. Then, I repeat the basic theme, but this time with a much darker quality. Soon, we arrive at another major cadence. This leads us to the You Will Always Have a Place in My Heart theme. I made some alterations to the rhythms to make it more consistent with the material that had preceded it. Additionally, I made the left-hand bass line much faster and more active to contrast with the slow section that came before. I repeat the last motive of the phrase 3 times, changing the harmony with each before finally arriving to the closing theme. The closing theme uses the introduction riff that we found in the beginning of the piece and turns it into a sequence in the same way that it was used in the beginning. Unlike the beginning, though, the riff is used in a much more stable manner, allowing it to indicate the conclusion of the exposition. The exposition is then concluded with a series of successive cadences. The development section opens with an abrupt shift to the parallel minor. The minor key is just the sad-sounding version of the key, for those unfamiliar with the term. The first 2 phrases of the development consist of a variation on the transition theme that last occurred between the 2 theme groups. The left-hand pattern is an exaggerated version of this, and is paired with a new melody that is based on the same rhythm as the transition theme. Next, we have some development of the Rainbow Dash Always Dresses in Style theme. The melody is actually embedded into the left-hand part, disguised as a very common bassline pattern. When I showed it to my piano professor, he laughed very much at this section due to the sheer difficulty of performing such a thing. The right-hand accompaniment is based on the same thing that the left hand was doing in the previous phrase. Towards the end of this phrase, the melody jumps to a high point in the right hand, just to make things more interesting. During the second iteration of this theme, I do largely the same thing. I make a few changes to the end of the phrase to help it transition to the next. To end the development section, I bring back the transition theme. This time, I turn it into a sequence to increase the tension and anticipation. I make it seem like it is going to arrive at one place, but trick the listener and then repeat the sequence again, but higher this time. Additionally, I make the second sequence minor to further increase the tension and the drama. Finally, I arrive at a massive cadence with a very dissonant color tone on top. The color tone then falls down a step and resolves. At this point, I pause dramatically to further increase the tension. This is the climax of the entire piece. Finally, the pause ends, the chord resolves, and we are brought back to the recapitulation. This is mostly the same as the exposition, except everything is in the tonic. This brings everything full circle and resolves the tension created in the exposition. A few phrases, the coda, are added to the end to prolong it and make it more dramatic. A few minor chords are also added for this purpose. Finally, we end with one last series of bombastic cadences. Now, with all of that in mind, let us listen to the entire sonata. I have created an annotated score that outlines all of the themes and where they are used. I also outline every phrase for your convenience. And that is the My Little Pony theme song turned into a classical sonata. I hope that you all enjoyed this, or at least found it interesting. Please leave a comment about your thoughts. I respond to every one of them. If you have not, please subscribe to this channel for new music uploaded every week. If you want to support me, please consider donating to me on Patreon or buy my music at Bandcamp for dirt cheap. See you all in the next one, and stay safe.